This podcast is about the presidential election of 1800, also known as the Revolution of 1800. Federalists believed the country should be ruled by the elite. They believed that if common folk took part in politics, it would lead to trouble and mobocracy. John Jay, a leading Federalist and the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, said, "Those who own the country ought to govern it." They wanted a strong central government to crush uprisings like Shays' Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion, and to protect the property of the wealthy. They wanted government to support foreign trade and private business, but not interfere with it. These policies appealed to people living on the Atlantic seaboard, merchants, manufacturers, and shippers. But the further you get away from the urban areas of the Atlantic seaboard, the less Federalist you would find. In the rural farming parts of the country, one would find people who were anti-Federalists, who supported Thomas Jefferson and the Republican Party. Jefferson's biggest support came from the middle class and the underprivileged, farmers, laborers, small shopkeepers. Jefferson's lifestyle should have made him a Federalist. He was a wealthy, aristocratic slave owner living in his Monticello mansion on a hill in Virginia. He was labeled a traitor to his class for his sympathy for the common people and the oppressed. Here you can see a picture of Jefferson's Monticello mansion, which he designed himself. This is a little chart that shows the difference between the Federalist Party and the Jeffersonian Republicans. We just discussed what the Federalist Party stood for. The Republicans, led by Jefferson, wanted rule by the people. They wanted strong state governments because they feared that a strong central government would take away the liberties of Americans. They wanted an emphasis on agriculture instead of manufacturing. They wanted a strict interpretation of the Constitution, and they wanted an alliance with France. The Federalists had many troubles as a party going into the election of 1800. One of them was anger over the Alien Sedition Act, which many Americans saw as a violation of their First Amendment rights, especially Jeffersonian Republicans. The party was divided over war with France, which was supported by Alexander Hamilton, and which the President, John Adams, worked to avoid. They had raised the debt through new taxes in order to build a navy to fight France. The Federalists attacked Jefferson personally. He was attacked for having fathered numerous children with one of his slaves, Sally Hemings. This is a political cartoon back then which shows Jefferson and his slave, Sally Hemings. We now know today through DNA testing that this was the truth and that Jefferson and Sally Hemings did father children together. And here's a picture of some of their descendants that was photographed in 1999 in front of Monticello. Federalists feared that a Jefferson victory would lead to the end of the Republic. And here you can see Jefferson trying to burn the Constitution, and the eagle represents the Federalist Party trying to stop him from burning the Constitution. They literally thought that if Jefferson was elected, the Republic would end. Because he had worked so hard to separate church and state, he was labeled an atheist who would take away people's Bibles. One preacher said a vote for Jefferson is no less than a vote against God. And here you can see a Federalist cartoon that shows Jefferson and the devil trying to pull down the federal government. The Connecticut Current, which was a Federalist newspaper, said that if Jefferson was elected, murder, robbery, rape, adultery, and incest will all be openly taught and practiced. The air will be rent with the cries of the distressed. The soil will be soaked with blood, and the nation black with crimes. Republicans published their own newspapers and spread accusations about the Federalists, saying that a vote for the Federalists is a retreat from the meaning and goals of the Revolution. They said that if John Adams wins, he will set up a monarchy in the United States. Jefferson attacked Adams and said that his mind was soured and eaten with ambition. This is the election map of 1800. And if you look, you can see that Adams and the Federalists had very strong support in the North, while Jefferson and the Republicans had strong support in the agricultural South. If you look at Pennsylvania in particular, it's a good example of how Federalist support was in urban seaboarding towns. And that's because if you look at Pennsylvania, the half of Pennsylvania that's closer to the seaboard supported the Federalists, and then the further you got away from the seaboard in Pennsylvania, the more support there were for the Republicans. The 3/5 clause in the Constitution said that 3/5 of the slaves would be counted towards the House of Representatives and the Electoral College. This gave the white South more power than it deserved and allowed Jefferson to win this election. Because of a technicality, Jefferson and another Republican, Aaron Burr of New York, had the same number of electoral votes. This meant the election would have to be decided in the House of Representatives. Here you can see the newspaper. The important question, who shall be president? The House voted 36 times in 6 days and could not agree on a winner. Alexander Hamilton helped break that tie. Alexander Hamilton feared Jefferson but despised Aaron Burr, who he saw as an awful and dangerous man that would surely bring about an end to the Republic. So he threw his support behind Thomas Jefferson. This would set into motion a series of events that would lead to the duel between Hamilton and Burr, in which Hamilton was shot and killed. It also led to Jefferson becoming the 3rd president of the United States. Jefferson later called his election the Revolution of 1800. John Adams is the last Federalist president. The Federalist Party will slowly sink into obscurity, and it is virtually over by the end of the War of 1812. At Thomas Jefferson's inauguration on March 4th, 1801, he wanted to show that he despised pomp and the pomp and circumstance of the Federalist Party. Here you can see a picture of Washington's times. You can see Washington in the background there, and everybody so elegantly dressed. He refused to be taken in a horse-drawn carriage to his inauguration. Instead, he walked to the Capitol. Jefferson dressed in normal clothes to show he is the common man president and not a king. He wanted to show the difference between a president and a king, so he barred the use of his image on coins. He would not allow official celebration of his birthday. He opened up the executive building, which is now known as the White House, to anyone who wanted to see him. He reversed what he thought was the excesses of the Federalists by releasing the men who were locked up by the Alien and Sedition Acts and paid back what people had lost in fines. But Jefferson struck a conciliatory tone during his inaugural address, and this is just part of what he said. "Let us then, fellow citizens, unite with one heart and one mind. Let us restore to social intercourse that harmony and affection without which liberty and even life itself are but dreary things. And let us reflect that having banished from our land that religious intolerance under which mankind so long bled and suffered, we have yet gained little if we accept a political intolerance as despotic, as wicked, and capable of as bitter and bloody persecutions. Every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. We have called by different names brethrens of the same principle. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists. If there be any among us who would wish to dissolve this union or to change its Republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of the safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated where reason is left free to combat it." In fact, the election of 1800 was revolutionary because it was the first peaceful transfer of power from one political group to another based on the based on the results of an election. Federalists accepted the results and did not attempt to hold on to their positions. This was a truly remarkable landmark in history because at the time, changes in power were usually marked by confusion, betrayal, and bloodshed, but not in the United States. I almost forgot. John Adams did not stay for the inauguration of his one-time friend, Thomas Jefferson. Instead, he put in place federal judges who are now known as the Midnight Judges. He did it at the last moment of his presidency, and he hoped that these federal judges would block any kind of programs that Jefferson and the Republicans would try to put in place. On July 4th, 1826, years later, the nation celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and also the death of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, the one-time friends who turned into political enemies, ended up dying on the same day, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.